Good evening, you're on the Postman Show, 105.4 FM, and this is one of our pre-recorded Christmas sessions. Our guest for this session will be Russell Malcolm, and we'll tell you a little bit about him in a bit of a future. Hopefully our good guest, Russell Malcolm. Are you there, Russell? Perfect.
I'm certainly here.
Perfect timing there. Look, we're during the Christmas season, what we're trying to do is we've brought in a couple of interesting guests that we have interesting stories to tell, and this includes my good friend Jamie Hugh, who runs Toast Cocktail Bar, and he's going to be doing a little kind of New Year's Eve on history of cocktails, and sort of a bit of a pre-New Eve post on toast. Then we're going to have Cindy Roberts, who's known as Angel Rock, who's done the amazing documentary on who killed Jennifer Baird. We're hoping to have the Wizard of New Zealand. We'll be talking to us a little bit about creative tourism and the fun revolution and the Ministry of Awful. We'll say, obviously it was a good chap to talk to, but today's guest is Russell Malcolm. Now, for those who know me, I'm very good at capturing large amounts of detailed information and being able to summarise it in very succinct language. However, the story that Russell tells is not only so incredible, but absolutely just so gobsmacking that really in some ways I find myself always looking at it twice. So what I might just do, Russell, is in succinctly as possible, maybe you just like to turn around and tell them actually the short version. If you had 1 minute to describe what's happened to you, you kind of outlay that, and then we'll kind of get into the meats and bones and start backwards and work our way forwards. How's that sound?
Well, that sounds good enough. I guess the short version is that a few years ago I stood up and questioned something with the council, and there was some retaliation from the council to keep me quiet, which I didn't back down to. Eventually, you could say we had a win on all the cases, and in theory I got on with my life until 3 or 4 years ago, and I approached council to apply for a resource consent. I was deliberately mucked around for 2 years. I had lodged several written complaints. I was told it was retaliation for my having stood up to them years earlier. And eventually I put it to them, I will be going to the media and all MPs about this if you don't do something about it. And as I commenced to post on a message board about it, I was arrested. The officers who arrested me reported directly to John Keys. John Keys set my gag order bail conditions, and from there the situation deteriorated. A couple of raids on my home and business, which has closed that down, and we haven't yet got to court on this. The actual charge is that I offended a town planner by referring to her as an evil bitch and a smart cow on a web comment that she was not party to. So I guess I'm the only person in New Zealand who's ever been charged with such an offence.
I'll just stop you there, because there's a couple of things just to fill out for the listeners. Is the first view is the council we're talking about this is the council of Rodney. Am I correct?
Rodney district is north of Auckland.
Yep.
And it's since been amalgamated with the Auckland Council. And the time period we're talking about is going back to 1998 when those original events occurred. And it was Brian Sharplin, who was the CEO up there, had introduced what's now known as a developers contribution.
Yep, and again, I'll just hold you there for a moment, because what I want to do is, okay, so we're talking about the Council of Rodney, and anyone that's followed New Zealand politics for the last 2 decades, this is a rather unique. You think Dunedin's full of good old boys, but Rodney seems to be even better than Dunedin, which is saying something. The other important thing to put into this picture here is that your background is you were very much a conservative, fairly much a pro-national person when you started this whole saga. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, and I was very pro-national. I had been since the mid-70s, I'll have to say. Okay,
so we're painting a picture here is that you were not a left-wing, disgruntled, near to do well that's trying to, got an public axe to grieve. You're actually at the beginning of the saga, you're a fairly conservative, businessman just trying to go about your business, and you're not really that interested in the politics of or social politics of the issue. Your main focus is on your business and your direct livelihood. Is that again a fair assessment?
That is absolutely correct. My background was I was in real estate in the Rodney district. It's a rural area, and most of the work we were doing involved boundary realignments and subdivisions and that, as the area was cut up from larger farms into smaller lifestyle blocks. And it really affected probably 80% of the sales we were working on when the council proposed this development contribution. And what they were doing initially was trying to impose it as a deferred cost on the new owners of properties before they could get a building consent. So we sold many, many properties, obtained figures from council that would say, hey, listen, this person's up to $3,000, $6,000 when they apply for a building consent to pay for the developer's levies, which we can't lawfully charge at the moment. And where I got stung was actually on my own private one, and I'm not really a property developer. I've done a lot of developments for other people, but my own property I've had for 25 years. And I applied for a subdivision which should have gone straight through. It was a very simple matter. And I was told that my application would not be processed unless I volunteered an unsolicited amount of money, which was a donation, which was $24,500.
Did they put it as a donation, or did they use slightly more
The exact words are, as a means of mitigating the effects of my application on the infrastructure, I would voluntarily and unsolicited make a donation of $24,500. It's on a council letterhead, on a council prepared form. And in the 9 months that I got mucked around trying to get this processed, and this is going back to 98, I had Brian Sharplin, who was the CEO. I spoke with him directly. The mayor, who was Doug Armstrong, and council managers all put in writing to me that my application would not be processed unless I volunteered this sum of money. Now, what's important here is that those persons had also testified to an Environment Court hearing and to the government inquiry into the Rodney Council that all the sums of money that were donated or obtained through this method were voluntary and unsolicited. So first of all, that claim was blatantly false. And that claim was made under oath to the government inquiry and also to the Environment Court.
And again, this is something which we'll ram through all the way throughout this interview, is that you've gone through a number of court proceedings, documented, and all of this is what you're saying is you've documented everything that you're saying here today, basically.
Unfortunately, I've got boxes and boxes of papers establishing what I am telling you.
So we'll just carry on there, yep.
Now, initially, when I pointed out to Brian Sharplin that the formula they were using on my one, which had come up with $24,500, if they were to apply that formula to these other people who had deferred their contributions, for want of a better term, some of those people, and one in particular, would have been up for $125,000 and not $3,000. So they had changed their formula, and under the Resource Management Act, financial contributions do not have a transitional period or a transitional weighting. And I'll use that term as that normally with a resource consent or an application for resource consent, they look at the district plan and they'll look at the operative district plan, they'll look at the incoming, and they'll weight it somewhere between them as to how it should be affected. But with financial contributions, they're like a light bulb. They're either turned on or they're off. And if they're off, they cannot be requested. And Judge Bollard in the Western Bay of Plenty had issued a ruling which went all the way through to the appeal court that people cannot even volunteer that money. So in a transitional district plan on financial contributions, the council can't even accept it as a donation. It's
interesting to note that when you say that this was done on council letterhead, that of course one of the councillors that was involved in Rodney Council was Ross Morant, who was an MP for the National Party, and he got unstuck with his own political career because he did exactly this on parliamentary letterheads in making tender for weapons back in 1995. So it seems to be a bit of a culture in that political circle of people that they basically see official papers as their personal fiefdom.
That would no longer surprise me. I don't expect anything different from them now, and I know there is absolutely no accountability. We are completely off our trees if we expect there's going to be accountability or good to come out of the system we have got. I'm afraid I'm too far past that now to believe in it.
I'm going to just kind of fast forward a wee bit because we've only got unlike Vinny where we only have an hour into which to tell your saga. So you've applied to build your houses. They've turned around and told you, well, sure, you can do this if you give us a voluntary donation. You've challenged this donation. You've taken it to court, and the end consequence of that court proceeding was.
What I've done is I just pointed out it's excessive and lacks accountability. I will give you the $24,500, but please, because this matter is already before the Environment Court with the developers, when that ruling comes out, that same ruling applies to all of us. I'm giving you $24,500. Just refund me the overpaid portion. Okay, that was simple.
Seems reasonable enough.
It was so reasonable. Brian Sharplin?
Just as a by-the-by, was the council going to provide you with a receipt for the money?
Oh, yes, I'd say so.
Yeah, interesting.
I'd say so.
Well, yeah, anyway, I won't go there. So, okay, so you know, they had all sorts of issues. You took it to court.
Before it got to court, they also gave me a list of things that are holding up my application, including the environmental protection officer and a building officer. I had two houses on my property at that stage, and they paid a visit to the tenants in one of the houses and searched the house looking for non-complying work. Right, pretty blatant, and they started court action against me for having a non-complying minor dwelling, which, as it turns out, I had everything for it. The records disappeared from council, and eventually, after many court orders, shall we say, we managed to get hold of the financial records for that building application, which proved that everything I'd said had taken place on the days, including we had a resource consent for it. It's just that the records had disappeared from council.
And this is quite interesting too, because the steps that were going into these records disappearing pretty much points to the fact that these records seem to deliberately disappear. They didn't just get washed away in the flood of 1964.
They most certainly deliberately disappeared. There's not even a fear amongst them of prosecution. They know they won't get done for anything. There is no fear there. There's no respect for law. But worst of all with these people, there's actually no empathy for the public and for what they're doing to people. There's nothing there.
Quite staggering. So you've gone to the courts. Judge Bollard have you managed to prove that you have the receipts for all your paperwork is in order?
Judge Bollard at the first court appearance said to the council, "This man's offered to give you the money. What's wrong with that?" And then you repay him the overpaid portion later, and they refused to. And Judge Bollard stalled proceedings even after the hearings were held, so it had a year leading up to the hearings. And then for about another 5 months, Judge Bollard refused to rule because of the implications to council. And during this time, and during the many hearings that we had, it was well established that the council employees had committed perjury, and one of the players in there, you've mentioned Ross Morant, he in this case came and supported me and also testified to the government inquiry at the time that we had 6 cases on the go between council and myself. In just one of those cases, Ross Morant testified the Rodney Council had spent $600,000 on legal fees on it. Right, now that's what's going on, and that was a long time ago. Nothing's happened to fix that now. And the irony of this was that the government inquiry ended up throwing out the entire council. Those who did not resign were fired. This is the mayor, the CEO, and all elected councillors.
So just to clarify this, the end result of what happened here was that they actually had a full government inquiry into your...
No, Sorry, I'll correct that. This was part of the government inquiry. This was one of the subjects that was traversed in that government inquiry into the Rodney Council, and they were found to be dysfunctional. What tipped that inquiry off was Ross Morant and Brian Sharplin came to loggerheads over what's known as the Penlink project,
Yep.
which is a bridge running from Stillwater across to Wangapara, which has not yet been built. And Ross Morant had organised a private financier consortium for that as a toll bridge. And when he put his idea to Brian Sharplin, he stood on Brian Sharplin's toes because Brian Sharplin had also organised one. So that's where they first come to loggerheads, and that's what led to the big breakup in the council, and people started looking at just how things had been running up there, and it was described as neocratic, and that would be a very fair way of describing it. And for many years, Brian Sharplin probably done a very good job, but he wasn't pulled into account, and he got out of control. And this is one of the cases where he got out of control. And that's what was basically found by the government inquiry. And I couldn't find anything with regard to my case in the final reports of that, notwithstanding that 3 councillors, which was Christine Rose, who's still involved in politics, Ross Morant and Graham Jerkovich, all testified that what the council had been doing to me was a straight-out standover tactics and like setting the black power onto someone. And I can tell you that when you have got the likes of Simpson Grierson, as a large Auckland law firm, given an open check basically to make your life hell, that's exactly what they do. And there's only so long you can withstand that before you are suffering a lot of stress yourself.
See, to put this in the context too, is that in 2007 I had Russell McVee decided to come after me on behalf of a former US politician called Richard V. Allen. Now, it was pretty daunting material because every day I was getting multiple phone calls, multiple emails, multiple packages from the largest law firm in the question. The difference was, in the end, they went away because I had nothing to lose. In your case, you had houses, business, responsibilities, employees. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Ben, I think it's very timely at this point, the subject you've just mentioned. There are legal decisions out now that what you were talking about there, where these law firms come after you and hound you, right? Make no bones about it. If they can drive you to suicide, they will do exactly that. There is no empathy there, and I will go so far as to say I believe it's very deliberate that these law firms will drive you to suicide. There's decisions out now from, unfortunately, from America, where everything seems to come from America, that the stress that's caused by this is actually a physical injury. It's not just a psychological effect, it's a direct physical injury. And it certainly has devastating consequences, and it has a high suicide rate. The post-traumatic stress and shock that people go into, it most certainly has a high suicide rate. And what these people are doing, and when I'm saying these people, I'm referring to the bureaucrats, I'm referring to the lawyers who are doing it, they know full well what they're up to. It is no accident.
Well, totally. It's part of a set strategy. So what we might just do at this stage is that this effectively sets the scene for the first chapter. You've engaged the council, you've effectively won the council, and you're getting on with your life. And what might Tim do is, Rikki, what's the next track you've got up for us?
I actually sold my business in 2004. It was a waste of time trying to continue working with the council. And the real estate company that I built up in this rural area, I sold out of that. And I had a year's break. I'd also been active in lobbying to get the real estate industry cleaned up and to remove the disciplinary powers from the real estate agents. I'm
going to cut you off there, Russell, because we want to get into this other subject, so we just need to make a quick music break. We're going to play a theme from David Kilgore and the Heavy Eights, and then we'll get back to the theme of corruption and all things that make it's just wrong. Russell, look, what we're going to do, we've got about 28 minutes left on the show, so what we need to do is I want to get to the section about what's going on with John Keys, because this isn't really, this is the point of story. When the Prime Minister starts getting involved in this level, you know that due process has gone out the window. So what I need you to do in the next 5 minutes is really succinctly fast forward what actually happened, because basically you got on with your life, you thought everything was good, and then bam, you found yourself in a maelstrom of you just couldn't believe it until it's happening, while it's happening.
Yep, I had my break and I started up another real estate agency. It was a low fees one. And in 2009, I had a number of properties. They were all rural based. One of the ones I had in Copper, which we're going to refer to as Pinchgate.
Cool. So we're going to keep it really low on the detail and just go straight to the cool points.
Mate.
Now, you've got a website, haven't you?
No.
So you got a Facebook site? I know of course you don't have a Facebook site.
I'm on Facebook. Yes, I'm on Facebook.
Yeah. Because this is the thing, a lot of those details, I mean, it needs to be understood that everything you're saying, you can back up in writing. So if people want to find out anything, probably the best way is to Facebook you. They want specific details to back it up. But so let's just get to the meat of the bone.
Okay. I applied for a resource consent in 2009 and council refused to process it. They said it was a prohibited activity and they sent it back to me, which was ridiculous. It absolutely was not. At the same time, ASB Bank called up my mortgages, which wasn't a big issue because I had pretty good debt to asset ratios and it wasn't a big issue. But ASB called up my mortgages. I couldn't figure out why they'd done that. I did have an overdraft, but it wasn't an issue. I had plenty of assets there to sell that, and the overdraft could be dealt with very quickly. Now,
we're talking about a rural environment, so the guy that runs the local banks is the same guy that plays golf with a lot of the people that we're talking about?
At the end of the day, I think we're going to a much higher place than that. I really do.
Yeah, but let's keep our feet on the ground. Yep. I hear what you're saying, but basically what we're talking is you ran into the old boys network.
I ran into the old boys network. Our low fees real estate agency model was working. We ran into the old boys network, if that's how we refer to it, and the council refused to process my resource consent application and said it was a prohibited activity, which it was not. I wrote a letter to the mayor, which was Penny Webster. I put in there case precedents proving it was not a prohibited activity and that should have been processed. I waited a couple of weeks, didn't get a response. I called the mayor's office and said, I just want to confirm you've received my letter. The response was, no, we haven't, so that was lost somewhere in the system. So I said, I'm dropping up another copy. And I spoke to the mayor's PA who said to me she had seen the emails going through between the council employees and they were holding it against me for my calling the council to account 10 years earlier. So that sets the stage for that. I reapplied for the application and it was returned to me with a number of questions, all of which had been covered in the body of the application. It was very clearly a stalling process, and I had it peer reviewed by some other town planners who told me you're being deliberately mucked around. Wait until it goes to Auckland Council, you get to change staff. So beginning of December 2010, with a change of staff, I relodged the application. The law required the first part of the application, which is a notifying process, to be handled within 10 working days without exception. And the 10 working days came and went and there was no issues with that and all the neighbours had given consent.
So the short version is what you proceeded in, as you're heading in towards a storm, you start to run across a process where normal everyday procedures suddenly become extremely difficult for you, that things are getting lost, you're getting feedback from within the council and on paperwork that it is a case of what is occurring is deliberately. At what point did you start realising that what you were running into went beyond just dealing with council?
It was March I began to suspect that the town planner handling it, we had requested a number of meetings, none of which were granted, but in multiple calls I'd had with her where I knew we'd cleared up all the issues she didn't have clear in her head, and then she would come back again a week or so later and go back to zero. What was important in that in January, it was put in writing by the council what the outstanding issues were, and all those outstanding issues were jobs that the council town planner had to do herself. I had 100% fulfilled all my obligations. And the application was not put on hold for anything that I was required to do. In May, I became aware that the town planner had lied to me, and she was previously a senior Rodney town planner. I went up the ladder several tiers, lodged a complaint, and that was immediately addressed with a meeting at the council building with a town planner who came in with me and a support person who came in with me. At this stage, I had actually gone into quite a bit of shock with the amount of things that were going on, and I'd started to shut down. So we went to that meeting. There was absolutely nothing that was outstanding from me for the application. That was put in writing at that meeting, and it was put in writing that the town planner would have her report done by the end of that week, and it would be fast-tracked through to an independent commissioner for a decision. That was put in writing in May, beginning of May. By November, she had requested a wastewater report, which absolutely wasn't required, but we got one, and it wasn't required. It confirms later it wasn't required.
So,
she then
so basically they're dragging the paper that that's been a long time, they're costing you additional money. At what point, I mean, you know, to fast track what we're doing,
Yep.
to basically corroborate everything you're saying, at what
Yep.
point can they turn around and say, well, hey, this is what he was required to do, he did everything that was required to do,
Yep.
there was a court case?
There wasn't a court case. There was, in November, I received an email from the town planner saying her report was now done. I had till 5 p.m. on Tuesday to respond to it, and it would go to an independent commissioner for a decision. However, she withheld the report and wouldn't supply it until after the deadline.
And that's one of the key things. They wouldn't actually, you had to give this report in, but they wouldn't give you the report.
Yes, but the other thing is she'd backdated the application to a notified hearing status, a publicly notified hearing status, a year after she received it. And by law, they had to be processed in the first 10 days. And her reason for doing so is she said the neighbours' consents were now dated, i.e. she'd sat on it so long they'd become dated, and she put it through for a publicly notified hearing, and she'd done that knowing
we're talking real Catholicism, yes, minister. They kind of put you in a situation when you couldn't respond. So all of this, at this stage, eventually you get to a point where you're on a chat room and you explode, saying on a chat room, someone's a bloody cow, and that's when things started getting really interesting.
Well, I just think I told the truth. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah.
I'd written to the mayor.
But everything up to this point was basically a civil matter.
Uncivil treatment in a civil matter.
Yeah, but you hadn't,
I actually feel that, I feel the town planners actually crossed the threshold into criminal conduct because there was fraud involved.
But at this time, while you're there, not necessarily in hindsight, this is just a case of you dealing with a belligerent council it's doing things that are stepping away from due diligence or due course.
It's with malice.
But it was you just feeling that you were dealing with bureaucracy. You didn't think that you were dealing with anything particularly sinister at this stage until.
Well, I knew she couldn't be operating alone because of the written reports that should have been responded to, and their checklist should have said, hey, why hasn't this report been done yet? Anyway, I'd written to the mayor with Len Brown and the legal department. I put it to them that they sort this matter out, or I'll be going to all MPs and the media. And about 8 or 10 days later, I was on a chat room in the Trade Me message board.
Just stop you there. So just before you're on the chat room, at this stage you have used up all legal proceedings. You've done everything within that you're expected to, that you can possibly do. You're doing everything you can. You're just following the letter of the law. There's no suggestion that you're doing anything criminality, and you're just simply, you've got the point, so hey, well, when all else fails, you go to the media, which is a fairly logical conclusion. So you've sent this process, you've notified them that, hey, right, that's it, okay, now, screw this, I'm not, pardon you, you're not playing by the rules anymore, you're now going to take it to the media. So you're on a chat room, bang, and?
I put into a comment that I had put the mayor and the PM on notice that I would be going loud with this issue, right? And people thought I was making there's a couple of people thought, oh, you're making a threat, which was basically, it was internet shrills, it was basically troublemakers, right? And I said, no, I'm not making a threat, I'm a peaceful person, but what these people are doing has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. Now, I received a call from a Constable Kirby at the Orewa Police, telling me she needed to speak with me urgently. This is on the 11th of the 11th of the 11th.
So you're on a chat room, you're talking about elected officials, which this is very important to understand, because according to North and South versus David Longy, where they refer to him as a lazy, I think the words they used was a lazy cow or a lazy individual. The point of the ruling on defamation was that people in the public are allowed to have viewpoints on publicly elected officials. So you were not doing anything according to our laws on defamation that was outside the law. Is that correct?
No, not as far as public officials. I did raise the questions that John Keys had stated in his election campaign he is going to bring down the time limit for resource consents to 6 months, and I said, well, why, when it's currently 10 to 40 days? And I made the comment that all political parties know the damage that these town planners' misuse of the Resource Management Act is doing. Why are they allowing it? Clearly it's getting the country further into debt, and it is. So I made those comments. Sorry?
I think your phone's just going off there. You could just maybe pick that up.
I've just managed to bury it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
So
I put it to Kirby. I said, is there any allegation I've threatened anyone? Any allegation I've harassed anyone? She says, no. I says, well, don't waste my time. I said, I'm fully entitled and I have a duty to be speaking up about corruption at the Auckland Council. It is totally appropriate that I'm putting it out there for people to know about it. You should be doing your job in investigating the fraud of this town planner.
And the context of this is not just coming from some loudmouth on Facebook. This is a person that has been involved in a process which has already brought down a council. So you are a real, clear and present threat to these people.
I hope so. I hope we can actually make them accountable.
So you get this first thing, you know, that something's a bit funny when a junior council turns around and says, I want you to come into the police station to have a chat, but I'm not going to tell you what it's about. So you've gone, well, sorry, go away. If you don't have reasonable cause, you're wasting my time, which again is perfectly legal proceeding.
I put it to her that I'll be getting legal advice. I talked to her next week. She said she needed to see me immediately. I said there's no threat to anyone. There's no harassment of anyone. You don't need to see me and you should be ashamed of yourself.
And but she hadn't said you were under arrest or that you're...
I asked if I needed a lawyer and I asked if I was under arrest and she said no. They just needed to talk to me. So Kirby was blatantly lying all the way through, and with my many years in real estate, I'm pretty good at picking liars.
Yeah.
And she is one of them. And that's a fact. And I've got the documents here to prove that. Now, about 8 o'clock that night, 8:30, I had 11 people round for dinner, and knock on the door, Sergeant Mark Hobbs and Constable Kirby, who introduced themselves as that. I hadn't met them before, come in and say they need to talk to me. I'm sitting at the table. I said, well, you can talk to me here, but you shouldn't be trying to intimidate me not to speak up about corruption at the council. Go and sort the corruption out. They said, you're under arrest for misuse of a telephone device. Right? And they said, come back to the station with us. We'll process you, have you out in 45 minutes. Well, I thought this is a bit weird, but anyway, I went to the station. Got locked up for an hour or so.
They told you at this stage you were under for misuse of a telephone phone, but previously on this phone, she hadn't said that you were not being charged for anything. Is that correct?
She told me I was not under arrest, they just needed to talk to me.
All right, so now they've decided they're going to lay charges on you for misuse of a communications device.
Yep.
Or telecommunication, yep. So then what happens?
Okay, we head off to the station. There's more police parked outside the house. We head off to the station. I'm then put in a cell for an hour, then taken through for an interview. At the interview, I get stuck into them for picking on me when I'm actually the victim here. I'm the victim of crime, and they're picking on me to keep me silent. Right? Now, during the interview, they tell me it's nothing to do with the Auckland Council, and that's in the transcript of the interview. At the end of the interview, I asked them what I'm actually charged with, and I'm told again it's misuse of a telephone device. I says, well, who? Who have I threatened? Who have I offended? Whatever. Well, there's no such thing as offending someone, but who is it? And they said, we don't know yet. It'll be a member of the public. We'll have to find someone. That's on the transcript.
So, and again, this is quite important. They're telling you they have charged you with a criminal act, but they don't know who you offended against.
Correct. And that's a very important statement, that one.
Well, can you just read out to me the police report number? So just all I want is to quickly hold it up to
what I've got here is I've got this is odd. I've got a transcript of a DVD interview.
So
the number is 11110. Oh, so that's 111111. Yep. And 8155.
And dated.
And dated is the 11th.
And it's signed.
And it's... Good point. I can hold it up to your screen, actually.
That'll be good. But obviously, Radioland they can't see, but just for my sake, that'll be good. The basic point while you're working that one is the basic point is here is that we have a police document transcript, which is we can see right in front of us. He's showing us now, dated, signed, and got all the authentication documents saying, we need to find someone so that we can charge you. I mean,
it'll be a member of the public, is what they tell me.
That alone is pretty big stuff. But carry on. Let's forward up.
Okay, I'm then put back in a cell for perhaps an hour. I don't know the exact time.
Have you been allowed to contact your lawyer or been advised?
No, that was one of the dirty tricks when I get to the police station. They told me they'd process me immediately, so I had a friend follow me up to bring me home. When we get there, they say, we're going to give you an interview. If you want a lawyer, we're going to hold you in custody until you arrange one.
Yeah,
right?
I've come across that as a dirty trick before. Yeah. Happened to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, they then go to bail me. So,
and this is possibly the most explosive part of your story. This is amazing.
Okay. They then go to bail me. The first part on the bail form I see, not to contact directly or indirectly, and they name this town planner who I referred to as a smart cow and an evil bitch. Now, she wasn't party to this blog, but
now again, to quantify the statement is okay. At the very least, if you were talking about a private individual, this language potentially could be used as a breach of Telecommunications Act. However, because we're talking about a town is a town planner, is that correct, or a public official?
It's a town planner who's in business for herself, and the public need to be warned of people like this.
Okay, but she hasn't actually laid a charge against you. There's no documentation beforehand that she's laid a charge against you?
Not with regard to the Trade Me message board blogs, and also confirmed by the transcript of the interview that they've got no complainant. Okay? Now, what we've got here, I'm holding up to the screen the police bail bond. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that, yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Now, the first condition on it is not to contact this so-called complainant, who they said wasn't, and they said they didn't have one. And this is important because later on, this police officer, Kirby, says that she took a complaint from this woman in the afternoon and come out and arrested me promptly, which is complete bollocks. Mm. Now, not to contact the Prime Minister.
Yeah, we can see that.
John Keys or any other Minister of New Zealand government. Now, I said to this cop, you can't do that. I haven't threatened him. You cannot stop me seeing an MP. You just can't do this. Right, not to post any material on the internet relating to the ongoing dispute with the Auckland Council. Right? I say to them, no chance, you can't do this. You'll have to get a judge's order as a protection order or something like that to stop that, and there's no grounds for it. Mark Hobbs, Orewa Police, Sergeant Mark Hobbs, says to me, I put the phone down a few minutes ago to John Keys. I rang him. His bodyguards woke him up. He personally dictated your bail terms.
Now, I just need to stop you right there because I cannot think of anything more amazing than the head of state of New Zealand being woken up in the middle of the night to dictate bail conditions for what is at best a fairly minor matter. It just boggles belief.
I think what happened is someone had thought I had threatened, when I said I put the Prime Minister and the Mayor on notice, which I had, someone took that as a threat, contacted the Prime Minister's security. They immediately contacted the Mayor to find out about it. The Mayor and the Auckland Council produced the letter of complaint I put to them. They saw immediately that it wasn't a threat and what it was relating to, and at that they dropped it. However, I feel that someone, for political reasons, didn't want me to continue blogging. And that is essentially what Mark Hobbs said to me thereafter. Now, I argued with that. They told me to come from John Key, so I'm going to get remanded in custody unless I sign it. Before I leave the building, I say to Mark Hobbs says to me, listen carefully, he says, or words very close to that, New Zealand is going through a significant time right now. You will find in 2 to 3 weeks this matter will go away. He is referring to the election.
Now, this is also, just to put in the time context here, this is at the same time as the Tea Party saga, is that correct?
The Tea Party is the next day.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting because, I mean, well, it's really interesting, but the other thing that's significant here is that at that time in the Tea Party event, the officers of the New Zealand Business Review, which is hardly, the most liberal publication in the world, they would end up being raided again at the behoof of John Key, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. This is amazing. The head of state is actually starting to give direct orders for executive bodies to take action. Now, what is even more outstanding is that the legal interpretation of what should have happened during the Tea Party, which would have boiled down to the Crimes Act, which is very clear about what is and what is not a public discussion and what steps you must take to avoid a public discussion, should have been announced before the election, but it was actually deferred till after the election. Extremely dangerous precedents, and you're now the second case, in fact the third if we include the Andrea Vance tapes, of the Prime Minister taking direct action to basically get the results he wants, misusing due process to do so.
Ben, there's something else that we've got to take into account here, and it comes back to the GCSB. We know John Key is personally in charge of the GCSB. We know his schoolboy mate was personally appointed.
Well, you may do, but you may have actually realised that in actual fact, the appointment has now gone to Sue Kitteridge, who is the woman that oversaw the compliance review into whether or not the GCSB had followed all its legal or legislative procedures. She turns around and says, yes, they did, even though they illegally spied on over 88 people, and now she's the head of the GCSB. It's staggering. Talk about conflict of interest.
Well, just take one more logical step. 88 New Zealanders illegally spied on by the GCSB. John Key couldn't issue the search warrants for them, or the warrants to surveil them, etc. So they used the police. Now, for the police to obtain those search warrants, they had to mislead the court for the reason for doing so.
And this is a very important point too, because during the, if you look at the material provided to the judge for the search warrant on Operation 8, which I actually have had, it's now actually simply been disappeared. But that documentation, when you review it, is quite clear. If anyone knows anything about weapons or any military procedure, which is, I have 6-year history, the police deliberately misled the judge on what they actually saw. And that's clear to anybody who knows anything about weaponry.
Yep, that's...
And we're not talking slightly, we're talking grossly. And if anyone wishes to charge me in defamation, I suggest bring it on, because once you get hold of those documentations you've taken through, it's pretty clear that that was a hatchet job. And, I believe there's more to Operation 8. It's not a black and white issue, but certainly the documentation that the police used, which allowed them to misuse their powers, was way over the top.
That would have to be fairly obvious to anyone who looked at it. And the worst thing, Ben, is that New Zealanders have to know this is going on, yet what are they going to do about it? That's the issue.
Well, it's hard to say, because, when we look at some of the legislation, we look at the laws that have gone into now that you can't pull over the Prime Minister for speeding, which has, changed since Helen Clark's All Black incidents. We look at the GCSB laws which occurred, which have now been changed to stop the fact that basically the GCSB has spied on people illegally, which includes, at the behest of John Keys, there is direct link. If they did something wrong, then it was John Keys directly responsible for that. And then we now turn around and see them again in Operation 8. They had to change the law on surveillance because, again, they had got that wrong. And this seems to be a procedure where whenever they get caught doing something, whereas you and I are held accountable, they simply change the law to suit them in hindsight.
Yep, absolutely.
So, we need to fast forward, so
I'll be as fast as I can here. On the Monday, I appear in the North Shore Court. I tell the judge I want the matter thrown out. It's politically motivated. The prosecutor confirms to the judge the matter has come from the highest level of government. That's on the transcript, and I could hold that up, but I'd rather actually show you another one as well. At that, not a single thing is discussed about the charge. The judge actually says she has nothing about the charge in front of her, and she orders the gag order bail conditions to continue, which I'm holding up in front of you now. And those conditions are not to contact the Prime Minister or any other member of government. So that's carried on, and nothing said in the courtroom about the charge against me, just where it's come from. In January, I receive a call from a sergeant over River Police who confirms that it's come from John Key himself and his involvement is a problem. Late January, my property is raided and my business is effectively shut down. The staff computers, everyone's computers are taken. This is in relation to this charge. Now,
okay, so again, to put this in context, have you ever been in trouble with the police beforehand?
When I was a teenager.
Okay.
So we're talking 35 years ago.
Okay. So other than that, you've paid your taxes, you've pretty much voted national all your life, by all accounts an upright standing person, you've had a little bargy with your local council, it turned out that you're in the right, you continue to have a few little kind of, for want of a better word, tug of war with the council situations. On Facebook, you say that something which all of us have at one stage or another said something about our local council members. Suddenly, the Prime Minister is stepping in, setting your bail terms, and now they're going after your business and everything you have and destroying effectively 30 years worth of life because you called a local town planner a cow.
I think we all know that's not why I was charged. I think we all know. There's the search warrants there, and they took absolutely everything. The search warrants was out of date, the first one, so they came back a few days later and cleaned out again, knowing that they had 100% put us out of business. I asked Michelle Kirby several times over those months, what is the actual offending content I've been charged with, and she refused to tell me. On the 12th of May 2012, she arrested me for non-appearance in court, notwithstanding that medical certificates had been provided. She said to me, you're going to look very stupid if you say anything about John Key in court. I take that as an attempt to intimidate a witness, not to tell the truth. I said, you can't hide it. Are you telling me there's nothing in your disclosure? She went silent. I said, you are aware that the sergeant in the court has already confirmed that John Key was behind it, and she then started to really panic.
And I've seen this happen before as well.
Okay, so that was there. But I then received a document which attached the search warrant. Now, the applications for the search warrant and the affidavits I haven't got. They won't supply them. They won't supply the notes and the reports of Mark Hobbs from the Old River Police.
Sergeant Mark Hobbs.
Okay, but there's another document I'm holding up now which has got a police letterhead on it. It's made out to trade me. It's a request for information, and it accompanies the search warrant. And in it, Michelle Kirby has signed this, and she said that Mr. Malcolm had a fight with the council and took it to the message boards. Well, I'm fully entitled to express an opinion on the message board. She says that Mr. Malcolm loaded up a YouTube clip showing a council worker in the US being shot in the head. That is absolutely, completely unfounded and untrue. There is no such clip being posted.
So this clip that she claims in the warrant, I mean, there's two things here. First of all, did she provide a link to such a clip? Is there a link?
There is no such.
So in other words, she just said, you can see anything. You saw a video chopping off his head or whatever. She provided no evidence that YouTube even exists.
It doesn't exist. There was no such thing posted.
Yeah, but let alone that whether it exists or not is when the application to train me, there wasn't even any attempt to provide any evidence to support anything that she's saying, other than I'm the police, you will believe what I'm saying.
Yep, that's what she's done. It says he named the council worker head dealing with and insulted her. Well, I think I've told the truth in describing what she is. He talks about dying for his cause. I talked about the stress it's having on my life, just the same as I've talked about it with you earlier on.
Yeah.
About the stress that when these people do this to you. the key point on this is, with the mention of the Prime Minister, the whole matter is now being monitored closely at the highest level.
So this
Okay.
So she wrote that to trade me.
That's
Wow.
written on this form to
So,
trade me. This
so
is the
a
same
junior
Michelle Kirby
constable says, because a guy who runs a business got frustrated with his council and he vented on Facebook, this has now been viewed by the highest levels of government. That is shocking.
Well, it's there to see.
Yeah.
I'm holding it up. You can read it.
But what's even amazing is that on the basis of what she said, that Trade Me actually said, that she's a junior bloody police officer. Yeah.
She was described as a highly experienced officer when they tried to remand me in custody. There's a lot I haven't told you.
And Smurf is a highly experienced Smurf.
On the 12th of May, they arrested me for non-appearance in court. I was very, very ill. I was suffering severe chest pains. My partner demanded that they take me straight to hospital. They didn't. They also drove me straight past the open North Shore court at about 2:30 in the afternoon, where they could have taken me in. They didn't do that. They put me through into the cells at the North Shore station, clearly with the intention I'd be spending the weekend there. They should have, with a 52-year-old male suffering chest pains, should have notified the station staff that they had someone in there that needed to be monitored. They did not. I did not get checked until 10 p.m. that night. When I was checked, I was then admitted to North Shore Hospital Intensive Care Unit for 24 hours. I think Michelle Kirby planned on killing me, and that's my opinion. This is the same cop who tried a few hours earlier to try and took me out of saying anything about John Key being involved in my arrest.
Well, regardless of whether that's the case or not, I mean, have you carried out any police complaints authority against this council?
No, I have lodged a complaint with the Human Rights Commission, and I've heard nothing back from them.
Okay, just another thing I just want to clarify too is that now these events were all happening in 2007. Is that correct?
No, the arrest took place in 2011.
Sorry, 2011. So
Yeah.
you were charged in 2011.
Yep.
We're approximately 3 weeks away from 2014. So for misuse of a Telecommunications Act, which is not exactly a huge crime requiring forensics in multiple court cases, 4 years later, and you still haven't seen the inside of a court for this charge. Is that correct?
No, they tried to run we were scheduled for a hearing on the 9th of July this year.
Now, is this this deposition hearing? Is that correct?
It was just a full hearing.
Right. Okay. Yep.
It doesn't even go to depositions. And we were scheduled for a hearing. However, on the 4th of July, my house, as you're aware, was raided. I was dragged out on the street and forbidden to go back in. This isn't to do with the ASB Bank. I was dragged out on the street and forbidden to go back in. I could not access any of my records. So we had a hearing booked on the 9th, and they tried to bulldoze ahead with that hearing on the 9th, notwithstanding the complainant wasn't available. And the judge couldn't decide if such a charge exists. So here's the charge. It's misuse of a telephone device with intention of offending the recipient. How can I intend to offend a recipient who's not even a recipient and has never seen the blog? There's never been anyone in New Zealand charged with this, and right now I needed to compare it to two issues. One is the Summer Burston's comment about the soldiers in Afghanistan, and you may recall that a Facebook hate page was set up with 23,000 people going on that, many of them threatening to kill, murder, giving out her address, giving out her family's addresses, etc., and not a single thing was done by the police. They were direct threats and inciting people to kill, murder, rape and torture. Nothing was done by the police. And yet I refer to an evil bitch as an evil bitch and I get arrested with urgency. I lose my home, my business, everything. I'm dragged out in the street with absolutely nothing. Something's wrong there. The second one is these Roastbusters guys. Now they've been identified online. There's been lots of comments made about them online. Yet no one's arrested for exposing them and wanting to kill them or torture them. And I certainly didn't make any threats to this town planner. In addition to that, the Roastbusters guys are naming their victims and putting their photos online.
Well, again,
someone.
that is a glaring example because in the case of the Roastbusters, you have the offenders admitting they're carrying out a crime. You have multiple complainants saying that the offenders who have admitted they're carrying out a crime going to the police, and the police turning around saying, well, we're not sure that a crime has been committed. Which really, just bearing in mind, of course, one of the other things about the Roastbusters is that, of course, one of them is the son of a mid-level police officer. Which,
that wouldn't influence the police. The police are very honest in this country.
Well, you know, I mean,
you can have full confidence in them.
Well, it really boils down to the issue on that one, is that what I've been saying time and time again is that for as much the police's sake as anybody else's, we need a genuinely independent police authority, just like any other Western government actually has, but we don't. And it seems in this case, once you outside of the powers that be or the old boys network's pleasure, you lose all right to due process. And this seems to be the case, even if you know, we only take what you're saying at 10% of what you're saying is correct. It seems to me the whole process that you've been from beginning to end is one of constantly of due process being actually ignored, and in hindsight shown this to be the case, but yet there's no accountability to the people that have actually offended against you, and there is no attempt to rectify the situation accordingly. And some of what you're telling me is just and documented is quite farcical.
Well, Len Brown, who received a number of written complaints, who ordered an urgent inquiry, when we attempted to get the results of those investigations under the Official Information Act, Len Brown's office responded no notes were kept. We know that to be completely false. I'm about to hold up a document to the screen right now which shows that when I go to court that they're sending along spies to watch me who report back to Len Brown's office. So I'm holding up a document now, and the front one is the top one is Michael Joseph, who is Len Brown's legal advisor.
Yeah, we can see
Len
that.
Brown's office.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And on the bottom of the page I'm holding up, it says that they went along to the court hearing to see what was going on with me, and I failed to appear. So we know that there's a council, a lady from council going in to watch every appearance that I go to. The other interesting thing is that all these appearances are empty courtrooms.
Well, what blows me away is, you know, it strikes me that you've documented every process for every step along the way pretty diligently. What has been the response of media personnel? I mean, people like the Campbell Live. I mean, have you approached them or have you talked to them?
I know multiple people have sent stuff off to Campbell Live and the likes of them, and there's been absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I don't think they're allowed to touch it. Now, I briefed David Cunliffe on this, as did others, and I know other people have briefed many other MPs. None will touch it. And what that's telling me in this society is that we are wasting our time going to what we think are the watchdog groups. We are in a society that simply doesn't work, and the lesson it's teaching us is we need to replace it. The model doesn't work. The rot is set in at too many levels.
The question is, and it's a very genuine question, is how does one go about doing this process? Because it strikes me that, you know, short of unlawful insurrection, your abilities to actually protest or get accountability are zero, or increasingly zero.
They're increasingly zero. The other interesting thing which I need to mention here is the ASB grabbed my properties. I was trying to pay the mortgage. I had the money in the bank to pay the mortgage. We also have a basic right to refinance under the Property Law Act. ASB refused to allow valuers on my behalf to look at my properties so we could finish off the refinancing. They then sold them at half their values.
And again, I'm just going to quickly intersection. You know, when I say, you know, armed insurrection, this is not actually something I support. In fact, I generally don't. But also, I mean, your experience of the bank isn't unfamiliar in the sense of we are down here in Dunedin. I was covering a story on the financing of the Dunedin Stadium, and I really had no idea in terms of looking at who the investors were that were. Money was paid to the council, and the council in turn issued bonds, which was used to pay for land built. The stadium was built on at 600% above government valuation. That money was paid out bonds that were paid at above normal rates. It wasn't offered to mum and dads. It was only offered to habitual investors. And when I raised the question of who the habitual investors were, bang, suddenly I had the banks really trying to crush me, and I had no idea what I'd stepped on until that point. So what you're telling me about the role of banks in this doesn't really surprise me.
Well, just keep in mind that I've got 2 documents here. One, a prosecutor telling the judge it's come from the highest level of government. The other one is an application for information attached to a search warrant, both saying it's come from the highest level of government. The letters or the emails that came to me from Bell Gully, who were the solicitors acting for ASB Bank, and they simply closed the door in every respect on me. Right, and I could still pay the mortgage, and they wouldn't allow me to pay the mortgage off. They sold them instead of allowing me to pay the mortgage off. The solicitors at Bell Gully CC'd their emails to a Murray Trinley, I think it is, who's the senior partner at Bell Gully in Auckland.
Mm.
I believe the senior partner for Bell Gully in Wellington is Finlayson.
Mm.
Can you get a higher level of government than that? But that, of course, is a quantum leap, isn't it?
Mm.
What exactly makes you feel that you've annoyed people at this highest level? What have you done? Is there something you've done that you haven't told us?
No, well,
Why has it annoyed them that much?
And I've been posting about corruption and how we need to be tidying up our society. I've definitely done that. As far as I can see, I think the key comes from Mark Hobbs, Sergeant Mark Hobbs' words. Right? New Zealand's going through a significant time right now, and you'll find this matter goes away after that. So the next 2 to 3 weeks. So it's election time. And that's all I can pick, is that I had put a lot of pressure on the Resource Management Act, the damage it was doing. John Keys having said he's going to tighten up the time for processing resource consents to 6 months. I ask why when it's currently 10 to 40 days.
So,
I think he simply overstepped the mark and thought he could intimidate someone and it would all be okay, and he had someone there he could intimidate and they would just curl up and go away.
So you're basically saying in the context of this all happened in the lead up in days or weeks before an election, they were dealing with an individual that had previously proved to be a thorn in their sides in relation to council matters, and they simply overreacted. They thought that they told you to shut up, you'd shut up, and then it'll go away and it'll be business as usual.
Yeah, well, that's what I wonder. Why hasn't it gone away? Is it because you've dug your toes in and said, no, I want my day in court?
They pushed me to plead guilty and they discharged me without conviction. They've pushed me for that. There was another judge who actually said to the police, what's this matter doing in court? It shouldn't be here. Go back and retake your instructions. It shouldn't be here. But the question I have to ask is there's never been anyone in New Zealand who's been arrested for blogging or making a comment like that.
Well, actually, I mean, but you've just actually raised another good point too recently, because we have, and Rikki, you might be able to fill me out on this one, the Martin Bradbury's blog that police just recently took action against. That's right, because he was lampooning, Martin Bradbury, who does the blog Tumeki, was lampooning the police's behaviour in relation to the Roastbusters situation, and the police have actually stepped in and now basically turned round, and again, they've tried to basically silence him, using very, very dubious interpretation of the law. So, you know, this is not you're not a one-off, this is actually becoming an increasingly normal situation. And again, when we were interviewed with speaking with Alistair Thompson, who runs Scoop Media, you know, we looked at the use of the word subversive in terms of reference to investigative journalists by the New Zealand Defence Department. This is actually becoming quite normal, that our security forces are starting to deem normal people who go about their everyday lawful business, but that are a threat to their power structure, to be subversive.
Yeah, what you've got is, keep in mind, we're trying to think which act it is, whether it's anti-terrorism or GCSB, but it's people who could be a threat to an offshore corporation's interests can be deemed a terrorist threat, economic interest threat. There's something else, just jump the subject while I can still get this one in my head. The Police Association this year, just keeping in mind near the end of the year, made a few statements during the year. One was about an incident in Dargaville where they said a group of people attacked the police and said how disgusting it was. Like the statement came out on a Saturday morning, and the Police Association spoke up and said these people attacked the police. Later on, we found out that wasn't the case, and there was cell phone footage that the police hadn't managed to seize, which proved otherwise. And then we have the incident in Kawhia, where the young chap down there was belligerent with a police officer, right? And the police association publicly said that a group of people had badly assaulted the police officer, right? And then they named the people arrested. Now, that's offending people who were innocent. The police association lied to the public to influence their opinions before a hearing.
But this is quite interesting too, because in contrast, the context I recently had on a case on 60 Minutes was of an Auckland businessman who was attacked by a police dog because the police handler, who was uncertified and had allowed the dog off his leash when the believed suspects were not cited. Basically what happened there was that he went through the procedure. The police agreed that this guy had mishandled his dog, was uncertified, had basically lied to the police complaints agency. Yet at that stage, whenever the guy turned around to try to find out what had actually happened to the police officer in question, he was told, "I'm sorry, we can't tell you that due to the Privacy Act." But yet you've just given us an example where the police name and shame offenders, which then turn out to be innocent.
That Kawhia incident is something that every New Zealander needs to look at. The police role in saying these people attacked and beat up that police officer was a completely false statement. Absolutely, completely false. The police, of course, seized all the cell phone footage they could, and fortunately some people had the good mind to not hand it over and gave it to TV3 News. And
that's also what we're seeing is a deliberate record of basically evidence that puts the police in bad light being disappeared and destroyed. But before, what I'd like you to do is we're just going to play one more track, but while we're doing this, I'd like you to have a think about, without resorting to violent methods and without having any faith in a legislative process that is so flawed it's ridiculous, it's like a sieve. What steps do you believe that New Zealanders can do to readdress this obviously imbalance between the state and the people? So, I don't know, Rikki, what are you going to give us this time around? You're not as foolish as you look, sir. Okay, what we'll turn around is we've just told a really incredible story about your event, and to be honest, I hope we've done it justice, because there is so much complexity and detail and documentation. We've had to do basically what's effectively happened, taken over 4 years of your life and within an hour. So hopefully we've got the key points there.
Russell, one simple question. What's the solution? What do you want? What's justice for you coming out of this?
What he said.
I don't know if justice can come through the systems we've got, to be honest with you.
So how do you change those systems?
Well, my immediate concern is to actually hold the ASB to task for selling my properties when we had refinancing organised. There's no basis for that whatsoever. That's probably my immediate concern. As far as making a better society goes, people have to take more responsibility themselves. I think when people vote, is they give away their power, and they are basically lazy in deciding it's all somebody else's task now. They've given away their power and they don't have to think. They can go and watch TV, and that's how they can live their lives, just be programmed.
Yes.
To have a better society, we've all got to look within, because injustices only carry on because the masses allow it. It's not, you can look at John Keys, and he's blatantly handing New Zealand over to the bankers. There's no doubt about that. I don't believe that Labour will do any different. They might do it in a different way, but it'll be social engineering. But that's what's gone on with the major parties. They're still operating in the same box for the same puppets. We have to change the way we think, the way we operate on a daily basis. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. There's a golden rule. Just treat each other as you want to be treated yourselves. The program that was on a few months back on the neoliberalism, it's so spot on the mark. And we, as a society, need to completely change the way we've allowed ourselves to be railroaded over since the 80s, basically, with things like that. We've seen it in our lifetimes. For anyone who's in their 40s or 50s, we've seen the world change in our lifetimes, and no other generation has seen that happen. And we've seen it happen, mate, and we ain't better off for it.
Hopefully, in the next couple of shows, we're going to have the Wizard of New Zealand on as a guest, and on one side we're going to be talking about something very light, which is creative tourism, but on another level, what I'm going to talk to the wizard about is the concept of a fun revolution, in which one of the things I find best works against these power elites is ridiculing them. They hate to be ridiculed, and it is also the best language that we all understand. When you crack a joke, we all get it. This is probably something that I believe that the best way we can do is treat each other as best as we can, get on with us as best as we can, don't take it too seriously, and make sure we laugh and laugh and laugh at them as loud as we can. And Russell, on that note, I have to say thank you very much for coming on the Postman Show. I hope you have a good Christmas, and until the next show, good night and good luck.
This program was first broadcast on Otago Access Radio and made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.